Good evening. My name is Rachel, and tonight we will be discussing the dancing plague of 1518. Our story starts July 1518. City, Strasbourg. Strasbourg is in the Holy Roman Empire, modern day France. This one day, Frau Trophea decided to leap into the street and she just began to silently twirl, swirl, and shake her way into that town. So she kept on this solo dance-a-thon for a long time. Before long, a lot of people started joining in. By August, it is said that the epidemic had claimed as many as 400 victims total. Not deaths, victims as in they were dancing their ass away. But it is thought that about 50 people a day were joining in. With no other explanation for the phenomenon, local physicians blamed it on hot blood. And a suggested remedy was to simply let them dance the fever away. As a result, a stage was constructed. They invited in a bunch of fancy-ass dancers and musicians.
Mumford and Sons.
They literally did. They built a stage. They invited dancers and musicians because they thought they could just dance the fever away. It took its toll. People started collapsing and dying from exhaustion, strokes, heart attacks. And this went on. It started in July. It did not end until September. The record was like 500 people at a time. And it finally ended when they sent all of the dancers away to a mountain shrine to be exercised.
Yeah.
Oh!
This is not an isolated event, though. This is just one instance of something called dancing mania. And dancing mania is a social phenomenon. It occurred primarily through the mainland Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, although it did occur way before the 14th. There were literally hundreds of outbreaks throughout Europe. It involved groups of people dancing erratically, sometimes thousands at a time, and generally they occurred during hardship. Whether the dancing was spontaneous or an organized event is widely debated. What is certain is that they seem to be suspended in like a state of like unconsciousness, and they were unable to control themselves, and they were not responsive to other people. The cause of death was mostly collapse from exhaustion, usually something to do with the heart. Not all outbreaks were calm, though. Some involved people parading around naked. They would make obscene gestures. Some had sexual intercourse right out in the open. Others acted like they were animals, and they would jump and hop and yell. Some danced, though, until they broke their actual ribs and died because of it. Others screamed, laughed, cried, and sang. Sometimes they treated observers very violently because they wouldn't participate.
Damn.
Oh.
And the weirdest thing, a lot of them became violent upon seeing the color red. The most common afflictions was chest pains, convulsions, hallucinations, hyperventilation, epileptic fits, visions. But in the end, it was just exhaustion. Some other times that this was prevalent, a lot throughout the centuries, like a lot. One of the earliest known instances occurred about the 1020s in Germany. 18 peasants began singing and dancing uncontrollably around a church on Christmas Eve and forced everyone worshiping inside to stay there until they could disperse the dancers.
Jeez.
In 1237, a large group of children in Germany traveled 12 miles, jumping and dancing the entire way in a marked similarity to the legend of the Pied Piper. So the mania ended up dying out in the mid-17th century. No one really knows what caused it. So modern theories of why this dancing plague occurred. Number one, food poisoning. This resulted from a specific kind of fungi that was used in that time period in that region to bake bread. And in the baking bread process, it changed and it structurally changed similarly to LSD. The craziest theory is that it's that religious cults decided to act out their ritual dances in the open, and then people were like, let's do it. But the most common theory, and probably the right one, is that it was a stress-induced psychosis on a mass level. They were facing a kind of hardship in their area, and when someone started acting crazy, they all were like, why the fuck not? We're all losing our minds. We're all not losing our livelihoods.
Hashtag quarantine 2020.
And they most likely took part of it out of fear or just like conformity.
Yeah.
And scientists have described dancing mania as not something fun and as we all do. But this is an actual mental disorder in a social capacity. So, we all dance.
Not me. Not
We all
sober.
love to dance. And you know what? We are all in a really sensitive place right now because of this COVID shit.
It'd be a lot less sensitive to be over.
When you just love to dance your heart away,
You just want to dance.
you just want to dance.
Good evening. I am your narrator, Justin Russo, regarding the World of the Worlds broadcast of 1938. This broadcast was conducted by Orson Welles, who was the broadcaster and also the author of the science fiction novel that was presented during this radio broadcast. This broadcast was about a Martian invasion of the planet Earth. Wells introduced his radio play with a spoken introduction, followed by an announcer reading a weather report. Then suddenly, it went to an orchestra playing in New York that was abruptly interrupted with a report that Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory had detected explosions on the planet Mars. All returned back to the orchestra and normal for a few minutes until suddenly the music broke and a story came in stating that a large meteor had crashed in New Jersey. Soon an announcer at the crash site broke in and described a Martian emerging from a large metallic cylinder. The broadcast went on to describe the Martians in great detail and talked about how horrific they are and how they were landing in other cities such as Chicago and St. Louis. The announcer described it as being chaos and widespread panic. What is the story of this chaos that was caused? Well, Sunday evening, 1938, was prime time for radio, and millions of Americans had their radios turned in, typically on Sunday evenings. However, the problem was that 98% of them were turned into a different broadcast about a ventriloquist and his dummy, the Charlie McCarthy Show on NBC. So contrary to urban legend and fable, not that many people were freaking out. There weren't millions going crazy, ducking in the street. The true story is that most people simply were not listening at all. But as it turns out, Orson Welles, your broadcaster and author of The War of the Worlds, actually ended up receiving his first Hollywood contract as a result of this stunt, and he went on to write, produce, and direct Citizen Kane, a movie that many have called the greatest American film ever made.
Mushrooms, bangers, tops and bottoms. You've done them. You've tried them. They're delicious.